You did everything right. The sleep tracker, the morning routine, the blocked calendar, and you're more tired than you've ever been in your life. Not burned out in the way people talk about burnout. Not the dramatic collapse. Something quieter than that. A kind of depletion that doesn't go away on weekends. A sense that you've been working very hard at your own life and producing less of it. And here's what's strange. You can see the metrics. The sleep score went up. The habits are stacking. The morning is structured. By every measure the system gives you, things are going well. And yet, the philosopher Michael Oakeshott wrote something in 1948 that I haven't been able to stop thinking about since I first read it. He was writing about a different subject entirely, about a kind of modern mind he called the rationalist. But the diagnosis fits so precisely that it almost feels unfair. He said, in every activity, this person is trying to get something done, and having got it done, he wonders why he is left unsatisfied. That's it. That's the whole problem. But it takes a minute to see why. I'll name the one area of your life where optimization doesn't just fail to deliver. It actively destroys the thing it was supposed to improve. And once you can see it, you'll understand why no version of the system was ever going to fix it. Start with what the system assumes about you. Underneath every productivity framework, every habit tracker, every biohacking protocol, there is a theory of what a human being is. It's not stated, it doesn't have to be, but it's there, and it goes something like this. You are a system with inputs and outputs, and the relationship between them can be measured. And once it can be measured, it can be improved. This is not a crazy theory. It works extraordinarily well in certain domains. If you want to get faster at a particular task, tracking your time on that task and introducing friction reduction tends to help. If you want to lower your resting heart rate over 12 weeks, there are well-established protocols that produce that result. The theory is not wrong everywhere. The problem is that it's been extended everywhere, applied to every domain of human life as though the category always holds. Oakeshott had a name for this move. He called it rationalism, and he meant something very specific by it. The rationalist in Oakeshott's sense is not someone who thinks carefully. He's someone who believes that any human activity can be reduced to a set of explicit principles, written down, transferred to another person, and then executed correctly to produce the desired outcome. The rationalist believes that if something is worth doing, it is worth systematizing, and that if you can't systematize it, you haven't understood it well enough yet. This belief seems obviously true until you start asking what it leaves out. Oakeshott spent much of his career pointing to what it leaves out. He drew a distinction, one of the sharpest in modern philosophy, and one that almost nobody outside the academy knows, between two entirely different kinds of knowledge. The first kind he called technical knowledge. This is the knowledge you can write down. It lives in manuals and courses, in the step-by-step guide you can finish in a weekend. It is explicit, transferable, teachable. You can hand it to someone who has never met you, and they can follow it. The second kind he called practical knowledge. This is the knowledge that lives only in the doing of a thing. It can't be written down, not because we haven't found the right words yet, but because the writing down would falsify it. It is acquired through practice, through time, through the accumulated experience of having done the thing again and again in the full complexity of actual circumstances. The surgeons feel for tissue. The teachers read of a classroom. The parents' sense of when to speak and when to be quiet. The physicist and philosopher Michael Oakeshott put the same idea with beautiful compression. We can know more than we can tell. Here is what Oakeshott saw, and what makes this more than an academic observation. Modern civilization has developed what he called an exclusive preoccupation with technical knowledge, the kind you can write down, while practical knowledge has been quietly forgotten. Not dismissed, not argued against, just forgotten. The way you forget something when the culture stops finding it interesting. And optimization culture is the purest expression of this forgetting that has ever existed. The sleep case makes the mechanism visible. You started tracking your sleep because you wanted to feel more rested. That's a reasonable want. And for the first few weeks, maybe the data was useful. You noticed the late screen time, you moved your bedtime back, you felt the difference. But then something shifted. You started waking up and checking the score before you checked how you felt. You started having the experience of a number rather than the experience of a night's sleep. You started lying awake, aware that you were lying awake, calculating the damage. The tracker gave you a new variable to manage, and managing it took up the space where sleeping used to be. This is not a malfunction of the system. This is the system working exactly as designed. The moment you make something measurable, you have changed your relationship to it. You are now managing an output rather than inhabiting an activity. And the inhabiting, the actual rest, the actual restoration, requires a kind of surrender that management makes impossible. Polanyi's formulation lands hard here. You knew how to sleep. That knowledge lived in your body, in the accumulated practical habit of a lifetime. It was tacit. You couldn't have told someone how you did it, but you did it. The tracker converted that tacit knowledge into a technical problem. And in doing so, it displaced the very capacity it was trying to measure. This is not a sleep optimization problem with a better solution. This is a category error. You applied technical knowledge to a domain that only yields to practical knowledge, and the application itself was the damage. Now extend the same mechanism one domain further, and you'll see why the stakes get higher. Think about the last time you had a real conversation with someone you love. Not a good conversation, a real one. The kind where you weren't sure where it was going, where something got said that surprised both of you, where you ended it feeling like you'd been somewhere together. Now think about what happens when you bring optimization logic into that relationship. It starts subtly. You read that quality time requires full presence, so you put the phone away. Good. Then you read that couples who ask 3 specific questions per week report higher satisfaction, so you introduce the questions. Then you find yourself in a conversation with a grandchild, and somewhere in the back of your mind, you're tracking whether this is going well, whether you're saying the right things, whether this will land. And you notice distantly that you're not actually in the conversation anymore. You're managing it. This is what C.S. Lewis diagnosed in a different context, in a book called The Abolition of Man, when he described what happens when a culture trains itself to treat its own responses to the world as merely subjective, just feelings, just reactions, while treating analysis and management as the real mode of knowing. You end up, he argued, with people who have evacuated the very chest that was supposed to connect the head to the gut. They can calculate everything. They can feel nothing. That's what optimization does to a relationship. It puts you in your head at precisely the moment you need to be nowhere but there. And the grandchild, without knowing any of this, without having words for it, feels it. They feel the managing. And they close slightly, the way people close, when they sense they're being handled. The moment you begin running a conversation for outcomes, you have exited the conversation. This is not a skill problem. You know how to talk to someone you love. That knowledge is practical. It lives in years of showing up, in the 1,000 small moments of getting it wrong and adjusting and trying again. No framework transfers it. No book installs it. And applying a framework to it doesn't improve it. It just introduces an observer into the room where no observer was needed. And the observer's presence changes everything. If you found this channel useful, if the distinctions we've been making have given you language for something you previously only felt, there is a guide in the description I want to point you toward. It's called the Navigator's Toolkit, and it collects 12 Oakeshott concepts in one place. A clear definition, a contemporary example, a specific way to apply each concept, and one key passage from the source text. The distinction between technical and practical knowledge is one of the 12. It's there when you want the full vocabulary, not just one key. Now the deepest case, the one most people in this audience will recognize immediately, and the one nobody talks about without embarrassment. At some point, maybe gradually, maybe at a particular Sunday morning, the faith started to feel mechanical. You were going through the motions. You were doing the right things, the service, the reading, the prayer, and it felt like nothing. And you didn't say this to anyone, because saying it felt like an admission of something shameful, like a spiritual failure that reflected on you personally. So what did you do? What does our culture train us to do with any problem that feels like an execution failure? You optimized. You found the app with the daily devotional. You blocked the morning time. You introduced accountability. You tried to fix the feeling by improving the inputs. And it stayed hollow. Maybe it went hollower. Here is what Oakeshott's framework allows you to see that no amount of pastoral encouragement could give you. The faith that nourishes is practical knowledge. It lives in the texture of a life, in years of showing up, in the accumulated habit of trust, in the practiced posture of a person who has prayed through grief and confusion and ordinary Tuesday mornings without any particular feeling at all. It cannot be optimized into existence. The attempt to optimize it replaces the living of it with the managing of it. And the managing produces exactly the hollow feeling you were trying to fix. This is not a spiritual diagnosis. I'm not saying what your faith is or isn't, or what it means that the feeling changed. I am saying that the feeling of hollowness is not always evidence that something has gone wrong with your soul. It is sometimes evidence that you have been applying the wrong tool to something that could only ever be inhabited, not improved. The practical knowledge of faith is reacquired the same way all practical knowledge is reacquired, by doing the thing without managing it, by showing up to the prayer without checking afterward whether the prayer was any good. Now we can go back to Oakeshott's sentence. In every activity he is trying to get something done, and having got it done, he wonders why he is left unsatisfied. He wrote that about the rationalist, about the modern mind that believes any human problem is a technical problem awaiting the right solution. And the reason the rationalist is always left unsatisfied is not that he failed, it's that he succeeded. He got what he was trying to get. He optimized the output. He hit the metric, and the thing that was worth having was never the optimized output. It was in the sleeping, not the sleep score. It was in the conversation, not the quality time protocol. It was in the praying, not the habit streak. And you cannot retrieve those things by optimizing them harder, because the retrieval requires exactly the kind of attention that optimization prevents. What the philosopher Joseph Pieper called leisure. Pieper was writing in 1948 in a Germany that had just industrialized itself into catastrophe, and he made a distinction that has stayed sharp ever since. Leisure, he said, is not idleness. It is not recovery for productivity, the weekend that makes you better at Monday. Leisure is a mode of being that is the opposite of optimization, a receptive openness to reality, a willingness to let the world act on you rather than always acting on it. He described it as a form of silence, not silence as absence, but silence as a kind of full attention, the attention of someone who is not trying to get anything. That is the alternative. And notice what it isn't. It isn't permission to be lazy or sentimental or undisciplined. Pieper's leisure requires more of you, not less, because it requires you to be genuinely present to something, rather than managing it from a safe, quantifiable distance. Roger Scruton said something that points in the same direction, that the experience of beauty requires disinterested attention, the willingness to let something be what it is without asking what it is for. The person who can look at a morning sky and think nothing about what it means for their mental health metrics is not less sophisticated than the biohacker. They are practicing a different kind of knowing, one that is older, harder, and incomparably more nourishing. You already knew this. That's the thing. You knew it the way you know practical things. Not as a principle you could state, but as a felt truth you've carried for years. The best conversations you've ever had were not managed. The best seasons of your marriage were not optimized. The prayers that meant the most came on the mornings when you showed up without an agenda. You didn't have words for it. Oakeshott gives you the words. Technical knowledge, applied to a domain that only yields to practical knowledge, doesn't just fail. It destroys the capacity it was trying to improve. And the rebuilding of that capacity doesn't come from a better system. It comes from returning to the doing of the thing, without the observer, without the score, without the optimized outcome waiting at the end. That's not a productivity tip. It's a different account of what a human life is for. If there was a moment, not an idea, but a specific moment, when you first noticed that trying harder at something made it worse rather than better, I'd like to hear when it was.